Let's start with Talks with Adri. Okay, so for today we're going to talk about the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki and the human experiment. Why this tale about these guys is important for us. So here we have the human experiment by the Anunnakis. This guy is an Anunnaki, and we're going to find many of pictures, portraits, statues, walls that have this type of representation in Iraq and Iran. Now they are in the British Museum and in Germany, but that's where they come from. It is important to say that the story that I'm going to tell today, or that we're going to talk about, started with the translation of the Sumerian tablets that were written 6,000 years ago, and basically the main work was done by Zecharia Sitchin, the guy that you see here. He wrote many books because he was able to translate not only the tablets, and he is one of the few persons in the world that was able to speak and to translate, understand this language, and also Akkadian. But he is going to not just take into context the Sumerian tablets that had different fragments, because remember that not all of them were complete. Some were just damaged by the time or broken. But he's also going to include the archaeological findings. He's also going to include the myths and the tales and the things that we find in other cultures. Not only the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Hittite, the Egyptians, and the Canaanites, and obviously the Hebrews, because many of the tales that we're going to find written in the Sumerian tablets 6,000 years ago are going to be mentioned also in the Bible. And the Bible was written 400 years after Christ. So we have a very big gap of how ancient were these tablets and when the Bible was going to be written. Zecharia Sitchin passed away in 2010. He was from Azerbaijan, and he wrote all these books that you see here. The book that I had is The Lost Book of Enki, because I selected this book among all of them because it was the story told by the Anunnakis themselves. The other ones are like written by somebody about the things that they did, and this is their own point of view. So it is very interesting, and I encourage you to read it. We don't know if these stories and these things that were written are true or not. We don't have proof, but many of these things that this guy wrote in 1976 have come up real. And we're going to see what are the facts that he mentions in his books that in that time humanity didn't know it, and that through the research of science we have proved that they are true. The story that he was able to create ends up being from beings that come from another planet, which means that we are definitely not alone in the solar system. He explains very detailed the solar system as a whole. He's going to say that there was a war, that there were rivalries, that there were many things going on in the outer space, and that's why these beings decided to come here, called the Anunnaki, and that they were going to come here to basically create the human beings and settle a civilization. So in the words of Matthias Stefano, and in his own words, they are going to forge the Western society. This is not only the creation of humans, but also the way that they made us believe and conceive the world, and additionally how we behave and how we interact with each other. So the influence of inhumanity is very strong of these Anunnaki beings. Other researchers are also going to translate the tablets, are also going to add different components to this story, but at the end, most of them end up telling the same things, even though they have been translated by different people now. And for example, Graham Hancock says that the Sumerian language is completely different from the other languages that we are going to find in the region, like the Babylons and the later cultures, but that because they admire a lot the Sumerians and because they translated it, but it was possible to interpret what they wrote in these Sumerian tablets. So here we have Graham Hancock, we have Antoine Parks, we have Mitchell Tellinger, and we have Greg Braden. We are going to find that the Bible also mentions many things that were written in the Sumerian tablets. For example, the Bible mentions the Anakim, that was a group of people, or it was a group of giants. Basically, it's how they are described. They are mentioned many times in the Exodus, as we explained last class, and also in all these biblical sites that I am mentioning here, in Numbers, in Joshua, in Samuel. But what is important to mention here is that the Bible mentions 3 different cities where the sons of the Anakim remained when the Hebrew population was expanding or walking towards Jerusalem. And that these people that were in the towns of Ashdod, Gaza, and Gath, basically here, these 3, mixed with the Philistines, with the population here. And then we have like a new race mixed with the giants and with the humans. So this is mentioned in the Bible. Goliath, the giant that fought against David, he was from Gath, one of these cities or places where the sons of the Anakim lived, where the giants used to live. They're also in biology, separate from the Bible. We're going to find that there are many things that also are coherent or correspond to the tales of the Sumerian tablets. In 2009 was discovered the earliest known Homo sapiens sapiens that dated from 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. This jaw of this being was found in Morocco. Remember that these Sumerian tablets, the translation was published in 1976. And we're going to see that the date for the most ancient Homo sapiens sapiens is in alliance with what is mentioned in the Sumerian tablets. Also, Greg Braden is going to prove that there is a genetic modification in the chromosome number 2. The chromosome number 2 is part of our DNA. It is 8% of each of the human cells, and it is the responsible of the cortex, of the frontal cortex of the brain, which is what differentiates us from other beings in nature. Why? Because thanks to this chromosome, we are able to self or consciously trigger into things. We can discern from good to bad. We have guilt, or we cheer up ourselves. Is like a part of our brain that allows us to take sympathy towards others, to be compassionate towards others, to take decisions based on feelings and discernment, and like self-healing as well. So this modification found in the chromosome number 2 is going to say that we had the DNA of the primates, and that towards a fusion that has nothing to do with evolution or has nothing to do to a method that we know today, was going to be stabilized and changed and allow us to be different, stop being primates and being something different, being an Homo sapiens sapiens. This discovery was made in 2017. Also in mining, we're going to see that there are many mines all around the world that were from thousands of years ago. These pictures from the sky that you see here are from South African mines that are close to the public nowadays. Actually, when I was there, I wanted to visit them with my uncle. I said, we have to go. And it is impossible to visit them. They are closed, apparently, because they say that to go within these caves is not safe for tourists. Perhaps it's true, perhaps they are closed for another reason. We don't know. The situation is that the way that you see, they were open, they are channels of stone, made of stone, but they were done with sound, with very high technology that we still don't know, that it is unknown for us. We are going to find not only in South Africa, but in many places. And if you see also the shapes, very well shaped. I'm going to read to you what Michael Tellinger says about this. He's also a writer, and he's also an archaeologist, and he's a researcher on everything that has to do with the Sumerian tablets. And he says, I have measured these spectacular energies and electromagnetic waves, because he went to the mines and he measured the electromagnetic field, the atmosphere in those places. And therefore do not hesitate to make these claims. The fact that these circles are all connected by the stone channels made very clear to any scientist who works with electricity or energy that the stone circles complex is a giant energy generating grid that is most likely used in the mining and processing of gold on a scale unimaginable to us today. So the extraction of these started more than 200,000 years ago. These discoveries, made in 2017, and it is important to say that, let's remember this, that we saw. 50,000 years ago, we were just starting to develop in cultures. And at this time, for example, for 50,000 years ago, is one of the mines that we're going to find in Egypt. But 200,000 years ago, the Homo sapiens he still lived in small communities. We were still in the Paleolithic. We were still in the Stone Age. The findings are just tools made by stone. We didn't have agriculture, only fire and nomad communities. So how are we going to think that these men were already exploding mines that were completely technological, with sound and with everything? But let's remember that the reptilians arrived to Earth 500,000 years ago, and the Anunnaki were the dominant race or the dominant beings 50,000 years ago. These dates are important to comprehend the recent findings that science and humanity have discovered. In astronomy, for example, the Sumerian tablets are going to explain very clear how is all the solar system, that they were 10 planets, and one of them is Nibiru. Nibiru considered the planet where these Anunnaki or beings are coming from. These Sumerian tablets explain very clear the color and the size of Neptune and Uranus. Things that were impossible for us to know, because when 6,000 years ago there were not even telescopes available. So if you see, and they are going to write very clear that they look like water, that they were aquamarine. So it's very, very clear how they had a clear picture of this. Actually, only this is a real picture of Neptune of 2015, because for the very first time, the Voyager 2 mission was able to go out of space and reach Neptune. We haven't been able to get there. And he took a picture and he confirmed size and color only until 2015. If you see, this picture of Uranus is not a picture, it's a picture through a telescope, because they have sent already the satellite, but the satellite hasn't reached there yet in order to take a real picture. The other thing that was confirmed that existed and that happened was that Great Flood. The Great Flood was mentioned by many civilizations and by many myths, but it was just a myth. There was no way that we were able to prove that it really happened until 2009, which was published in the magazine Nature, that it was a fact, and with several things that proved that this happened. So if you see, there are many things that happen that are these just mere coincidences or what? Also, other sources are going to speak about the Sumerian tablets, like Drunvalo Melchizedek and Matthias de Stefano. Remember that the source of these guys are basically, they are channelers, and not only them, many other channelers as well, and that they are able to tap in the Akashic records. So they explain that these other beings also came into Earth. So we have like many different things that allow us to think that certain things that are written here are possible. And as we know, many myths are being changed and translated in order to be explained to the mass, to the whole population. So perhaps this is a story that it is altered. We don't know. But even though it's a very fascinating story to consider, and that open our minds to different perspectives. So let's tell the story of the Anunnaki. Before the Anunnaki, and these here we're going to have two theories. The first theory is that the reptilians were ruling on Earth and then came the Anunnaki. The other theory is that the reptilians were the same as the Anunnaki. How does this work? The reptilians arrived on Earth 500,000 years ago or 450,000 years ago, more or less, and they are going to settle in different places. They knew how the Kundalini of the Earth worked, so they organized their cities in different places. For example, they are going to say that in Anatolia, Turkey, they were going to put the head of the snake. Here, the head is where they are going to storage all the information about how to survive in this planet. And these places that I'm going to tell you here are key places, are places that have had wars through all history. Because apparently there is something special about these places. Something that is there, and the person that is in control of these places knows the importance and the legacy and the knowledge, or maybe the energy or whatever it is in these places. Later we're going to find that the pineal gland of the serpent, or of the Kundalini of Earth, was going to be located in Armenia, in the Ararat Mount. So this is a very sacred point in order to activate the intuition. First, before continuing, I want to say that the Kundalini of the Earth had shifted. Now is in a different place because this was before the polar shift or the great flood or everything that had happened in that time. But this was how it was at that time. Later in Persia, which is what today we know as Iraq, Iran, there was going to be the heart of the snake, or the heart of this Kundalini energy. And this is a key point. We all know what had happened to Iraq recently in the 80s and before. Apparently it is a war for oil, but maybe it is much more than that. It is the heart of the snake. Remember that the heart, in terms of Kundalini, is the place that separates the earth from the spiritual realms. Is the place, is the contact, like this sacred sphere that allows you to experience different things that are not matter, only matter. This is very important because they are going to consider also, they are going to call themselves the navel. The Anakim or the Anunnaki are going to consider their civilization or their cities the navel of Earth, the place where they were able to have these spheres, the contact with the upper world, with the normal world, and with the underworld, which I will explain later. But let's say Persia was the heart of the snake. The solar plexus was the Tibet. In the solar plexus was where humanity learned to be themselves, when we recuperate our willpower. Later, the sacrum was going to be in Mongolia. At Mongolia, we're going to find the place where women understood their power and where they received all this knowledge from the snake in the womb. And the root chakra was the whole chain of mountains that goes from Alaska through all America down to Tierra del Fuego, Argentina, the mountains of the Andes. This was going to be all the root chakra. So it is a snake that basically embraces the whole world and its importance, what happens in the different energies of Earth. So the reptilians had this very clear, and they deal a lot with the yin energy. But one thing, it doesn't matter which theory it is, it says that after the reptilians, the Anunnaki took control, and we, the whole world, became a young, left brain dominated world. We can call it like that. The Anunnaki were, like you see them here, they are depicted like very strong man, muscles well shaped, with long beard, curly hair, tan, long hair, as we see here, or like reptilians. For example, this is a deity, also found in Persia by the Sumerians, and it has the reptile traits that you see here. According to Antoine Parks, that it is a person that also translated the Sumerian tablets, he's going to say that this is described in the Sumerian tablets, that this god had reptilian traits. According to Matias de Stefano, a person that channels and that also tap into the Akashic records, he's going to say that they were not reptilians, that they were different, that they had a different purpose of why they came to Earth, and that they look like humanoids, like that this giant that we see here, not like reptiles. The thing, or what these theories are going to say, is that when the glacial area happened, the reptilians used to be located in the warm parts of the Earth, and they also came to be more terrestrial, not like other beings of the stars that occupy different places. And that's why they had a relationship with humans. That's why they met these hominids. Maybe humans or hominids that were there. They knew the creatures that were on Earth. And some will say that the reptilians couldn't survive. Some will say that they left the planet. Some will say that they were basically, they camouflage, that they are able to change their physical appearance into humans. So what happens is that they are still among us and we don't know. Others are going to say that they hide underground and that they created subterranean cities, or that they were, or as Anton Park says, translated from the Sumerian tablets, is that they really didn't see or didn't allow the humans to see them. There was only one being called Enki who was going to deal with the humans, and he had the shape of the snake. But that everything that happened with the Anunnaki, they used to be at the mounts, at the top of the mountains, and this was forbidden for humans. So there was not a real contact with them. We were slaves of them, we did what they wanted us to do, but we didn't have a big contact with them. So we don't know exactly what happened to the reptilians, if they just left, if they hide, if they were forced to hide, or if they are the Anunnaki at the same time. But the world became dominated by these beings, and this being came in a moment where passed a comet and crashed with Earth. In that moment, and in a loop that their planet Nibiru took, that every 3,600 years crosses the path with Earth, or close to Earth, these beings were running away from their planet because they had a nuclear war, and they basically destroyed the atmosphere of their planet. Their planet was dying, so they needed to look for resources to save their planet, or to look for another place to live. What they found on Earth was gold. The gold in the monoatomic, in the white powder, in their monoatomic expression, was the resource or the mineral that they needed to fix their atmosphere. So they started taking all the gold from here, and they were able to enter when this comet crashed. So it opened a Vesica Pisces, and let's say that these beings were in the future and they were able to come to the past to solve the problem with their planet. So these beings came with great technology, with things that were not known on Earth, and apparently still that we don't know. Here we have the Tree of Life, according to the Sumerians, Tree of Life. And here we have their spaceship. And I want that you have clear this picture, because later when we're going to see how they depict it, like this was the meaning that we can understand now. So they knew, and they were able to open this portal in which they were able to come to Earth, take the resources, and go back to their planet, take it to their planet. So this is what they were basically doing here on Earth. Here we have how they look like, or how we, like humans, depicted them, how the Sumerians left their records. These guys are not only going to appear with a lot of... Let's remember that we're talking about long time ago, when the humans had not even dressed up. And they are going to have like a lot of accessories. For example, look, this earring. They have clocks, and they have many things that we don't know why they used. For example, here we have, this is Enlil. I'm going to explain who was Enlil in a bit. With a clock and with a bag, a handbag. Look, they all have handbags and things and accessories, handbags. This is another Sumerian god, and this is another Sumerian god, shifted like a fish, with a handbag and with a pine cone in their hands, with this fruit, which was the prohibited fruit to the humans. Many of them were androgynous. For example, this one is androgynous, not because of the beard. We will say it's more like a male guy than a woman. But that's, for example, this one, this bird, because of the muscles, we will say that it is more a male style. But all their deities are going to be trained to a very male energy, very strong, very dominant. And that's how they're going to settle the culture, the principle of beliefs. So the story is going to say that this guy passed through these Vesica Pisces when the comet crashes on Earth, and they are going to arrive here. They are going to be able to survive, and they are going to notice that there is a lot of gold and that they can extract. So Anu, the god for the humans, and the father for Enki and Enlil, which is like the main character, but it was never on Earth. He always stayed in his planet. He's going to send his two sons to extract this mineral from Earth. The sons were Enki and Enlil. Enki was the oldest son, but he had it with a concubine. Instead, Enlil was his second son, but son of the official wife. Enki, look that all these things start in a way affecting or shaping the culture that we have today, the Western culture. All these elements that I'm going to tell you about this story, because with the primitive people, or with the culture of other civilizations like the Mayans or like the Toltecs and maybe the Hinduists as well, they don't have these things that for these guys are key, and that had to do with the Western values. So he had a concubine, but he was not his first son. Sorry, he had a concubine and he was his first son, but from the official wife he's going to come Enlil. So Enlil is going to be more the leader rather than Enki. And these two guys, it's a story of love and hate. They are going to be very rivals among them. Enlil is supposed to be a very choleric person, or a very choleric being, and he wants to dominate by the force. Instead, Enki is a little bit more compassionate. He was a genetist, a scientist, and for example here, what it shows is the DNA. This is a DNA. It could be water, yes, but Antoine Parks, the translator of the Sumerian tablets, is going to say that this represents the DNA chain with fish inside. And you see, there are other creatures, animal creatures around him, because apparently he not only did experiments with humans, but also with other creatures that were on Earth. with other animals. And they have these strange tools and strange way of dressing up. Here we have Enlil with this thunder, or with this fork that you see here, also with his clock and with all his accessories, with his helmet. But this fork, the humans later are going to say that he used it to punish them, using the natural forces. For example, if he just went like that into a mountain with a ray, he was going to break the mountain and he was going to create an avalanche. So what Anton Parks and Zacharias Sitchin are going to say is that they had great technology that they use, for example, in the mining to create earthquakes, but they were not to create earthquakes. They were basically making the channels inside under earth. And this is going to make the first humans very scared, because they knew that they were able to dominate nature. But what happened is that they had a very strong technology. So Enki and Enlil started abstracting all this gold for more than 200,000 years. It is mentioned that that at the beginning, just when they arrived, 300 Anunnakis stay on heaven or on the space, because they were the ones that received the gold. And 600 Anunnakis, ruled by Enlil, were the ones that were going to explode these mines, that were going to extract the minerals. Enlil started exploiting the mineral, the gold, and he started taking it out for 200,000 years. But the other Anunnakis that were there, these 600 beings here, didn't like the conditions, and they rebelled. They create a revolt, a revolution. They say, we're not going to continue. This is not a good life. And Enki was performing his experiments, and he had studied the planet, he had studied the creatures that were here, and he studied the hominids that he found. And he's going to take the Homo erectus, that was at that time, and he's going to create a human. This is a drawing taken from a wall of the Sumerians. And if you see, it is very similar, like the god creating this being out of a potter of clay. So if you remember here, the Egyptian gods, the Egyptians are coming later, no? And also the Greeks. Here we have Prometheus making also with clay these beings. It has a lot to do with what it says here, that from earth, from the hominids that were here on earth, he was going to make this new creature. A creature that was a little bit more intelligent, a creature that is going to help them to work in the mines. And he didn't do it alone. What he did was he experimented several times, and this will have to do with the Mayan myth. He tried several times, and at the beginning, the first creations that were enslaved in the mines were like, they were going to be considered mediocre, or like lacking of soul, lacking of being able to take their own decisions. They obey, but they couldn't think by themselves. So here we have, for example, the giant with the little ones that were afraid of him, and all of them working according to what the big guy said. So basically, they were very cruel with these first creatures, with these first humans, and they were just working in the mines. So the human experiment made by the Anunnakis was basically create a species that was going to work for them. This species, and it is important to mention that he tried several experiments. At the beginning it didn't come out well. So he decided to create one with his own DNA. At the beginning he was taking the semen of these hominids and putting it into the eggs of his sister, for example. of the Anunnaki woman who volunteered to have this experiment. But later, he decides to use, in one of these creatures that were already created, his own semen. And parallel to this, the Anunnaki came here also guided by the Elohim, as I mentioned in the previous session. The Elohim and the Galactic Council had invited different people from the stars to arrive to Earth. And out of this invitation also were the people or the beings from Sirius. They are in the 6th dimension and they are the architects. Remember that in the session 1 we saw how these energetic beings are able to shape the reality before it manifests. So because Mother Earth, that is a very evolved being, decided that these hominids were going to be the neurons of her, or like the consciousness, the ones that were going to lead the consciousness of the planet, the mind of the planet, they were allowing these other souls, enlightened souls, to come into the experiments of Enki. So when he puts into his own DNA, his own sperm, into these other creatures, the souls that are going to incarnate these bodies are greater souls, are evolved beings from the stars, and especially from the planet Sirius. So this experiment was called Adam, this first new being. Adam in Sumerian means animal. And Eden, that is also mentioned several times in the Sumerian tablets, means the garden where the animals are located. This being at the beginning was a male, or he was an androgynous, he had no sex. He was just working on these mines, but he was more intelligent. So he was able to perform better his task. But because he was more intelligent, he was able to complain, to say, I'm tired. But the Eden, or this camp, that it was more like a concentration camp, for the cruelty that the Anunnakis treat, and how the Anunnakis treated these beings, he's not going to be happy with this. And Enki is going to create also out of him, or out of these, separate into two sexes, because at the beginning they couldn't reproduce, they were androgynous. And in the moment that he decides to create a male and a female, and they were here in this garden of Eden, in the place of the animals, Enlil, his brother, is going to see them, and he's going to surprise a lot, because he didn't know that Enki continued creating these beings and continue his experiments, and that he created a male and a woman. And because now they had DNA also of the Anunnaki, he felt attracted to the woman. Like, it's beautiful. Remember that at the beginning he only treated like animals, and now it's like, so he thought Enki went too far with his experiments. This is wrong. First, we were not supposed to mix with the creatures here. We were only going to create slaves, and after we finished with the goal here, we were going to leave the planet and kill this creature and disappear. And now these creatures are being intelligent, they have sex, they can reproduce. In one moment they can be more than us, they can rebel, they can do many things. They were threatened. So Enki feared this, and he got very, very mad with his brother Enlil to perform these experiments. So his first reaction when he saw this couple, or like these beings, male and female, out there, was like, oh, you have sex. So like, because before they didn't have. So these guys covered, because they didn't know why they were upsetting this god. And he is going to exhale them from Eden, from the camp where they had shelter, where they had food, where they have many things that were provided for this race of slaves. He's going to take them out from the Anunnaki cities. Many scholarships are going to say that this is like basis of the story of Adam and Eve later in the Bible and later in other myths, parts of the mythology. He was so angry that he says, we have to kill them all. And he goes to find Enki. And he says, we cannot continue with this. I don't like your experiment. I expulse all of them. I already fired them. And he said, no. He was defending his creation. Like he felt love for these beings that were similar to them now. And he's going to say, these beings are going to be very important for us because they are not only going to help us working in the mines, but now they can do other things. They can worship us like gods. They can convince the other Anunnakis that are not happy to continue working because they are going to be their slaves as well and worship them. And Enki is going to teach these new beings how to dance, how to sing, and how to perform things like circus, basically for the other Anunnakis to calm down and to do not revolt and continue extracting the gold with the help of these new creatures, of these new beings. Enki, which was supposedly to be the good god, and apparently he appears like a snake. He's going to find Eve, the woman. Why he approached to Eve, we don't know. Maybe because she was easier to approach to, because she was in this Garden of Eden. She was gathering fruits and all that. Meanwhile, the men were just working in the mines. But there is something that is written in the Sumerian tablets, and it is that he knew that whatever he teach to the woman, it was the legacy that was going to remain, because the woman educate the kids. The woman teach the things to their sons, to their children. So in this way, whatever is taught by the woman or passed through her, it was going to remain in the future generations. And Enki is going to go and tell her that there is a way of freeing herself. And he showed her the cone. This cone that you see depicted in many of these. This cone comes out from the tree of life, and if she's able to activate that in her, she was going to be able to be free. Obviously, Enki was super upset because he didn't really wanted a free being. Unless if he was spiritual, unless if he was intelligent, unless if they were able to reproduce and populate the whole earth and become more than them. And he appeared in the shape of the snake. So this is what it is going to say in the Sumerian tablets. The name of this snake was Satan. Satan in Sumerian is administrator. So it was the administrator of the garden who approached Eve to show her a way to be free. Here we're going to see that the human experiment was done with the Homo erectus, that was the man that was at that time. And if you see, he has like African components, like in the race, it will be more depicted like a black African man. Meanwhile, and also the Homo neanderthal, which is going to be more depicted like a European or like an Aryan race guy. So remember that we saw also in the human origin that these two species also mixed. So their DNA is combined. And out of this, mixed with the Anunnaki DNA, mixed with the Sirius consciousness, remember that the Sirius beings are etherical, they have no matter. But what we have is the Sirius consciousness with the DNA of the Anunnaki. Is going to be the result of this Homo sapiens sapiens, or first man, called Adam. That was not only one. Maybe it was one prototype, but it was the reproduction of many. Here we see in the moment that Enlil is going to fire the humans out of the Eden. From here, in terms of consciousness, it starts like a self-discovery journey for men. In the moment where these so-called gods gave us everything, we weren't really questioning ourselves. But in the moment that you have to work for yourself, adapt the environment to survive, you develop these ideas you say, okay, what can I do? You learn from yourself. And it's a journey that we haven't stopped up to now. We still question a lot of things from humanity, from why are we here, where are we going, where do we come from. So maybe this was not a bad thing. And we're going to see that Enki, also in his experiments, in the different groups of humans that he created, for example, he put some labels or he branded some. And he said, I'm going to free these ones to go away, not for the mining, but let them see if they survive. But for these ones, I'm not going to put hair on their bodies. No beard, no hair in their bodies. And apparently it is the group that developed in Asia, no, like the Chinese, Mongolians, that later were able to walk in the glacial period, cross the Americas and populate the whole America. Because there are tracks of DNA that they are from the Pacific coasts going up and coming down America that have similarities. And another important thing happened. When these beings that were still working in the mines, so some groups left the Anunnaki cities and the Anunnaki mining places, mining sites. But others stayed and remained, which are the ones that are going to become the Sumerian civilization. The Anunnakis that were here started liking the women that they saw. This was a calamity for them. The women and the men were jealous. They didn't like that they also have sex or reproduce with these new creatures, with the humans. But also because they wanted to maintain their blood. And that's why there were stories of incest mentioned in the Sumerian tablets. Both Enki and Enlil, for example, were fighting for the love of their sister. They both wanted her, and she had kids with both of them. She's going to be represented like this deity that you see here, Ninjusak. Ninjusak was the sister of Enlil and Enki, and that gave children to both of them. So women started being attractive for the Anunnaki. And also the tablets tell many stories that we condemned with our actual culture, because there were rapes, violations, incest, well, many things that happened. Remember that at the beginning they were giants and they were little and we were little, but because in the moment that we mixed with their DNA, women started being attractive for them as well. So we mixed even more with these guys. The other thing, and I want to mention this creature that you see here, that it is in the British Museum, this was in the walls of Babylon. You see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 legs. It doesn't have 4 legs. It is mentioned in the Sumerian tablets that Enki made also experiments with animals, and that he created, because he loved humans, he created the bulls and similar creatures to help the men in their work in the mines. For example, the bull was an animal that was going to help us with everything that has to do with strength. And he's going to tell one of the semi-god, for example, Adam, which was the first man, half, let's say, Anunnaki and half human, and half hominid. He was 15 feet tall, but later Noah was going to be smaller, and later actual humans are going to be smaller and smaller and smaller. And at the same time, these beings lived long lives, and later less and less and less and less. Until recently, we just changed our health system and our food, and now we are able to live long and long. But we are talking about 600 years, for example, Noah 800 years or 1000 years. Meanwhile, we are just passing the 100 years. Because of the technology that they had, they were aware, and the study of the stars and astronomy and astrology and everything, they knew that the Great Flood was coming. They knew it. For Enlil, it was a great opportunity to kill all the humans. He said, no, this went out of control. I don't want them. It's a great opportunity, and I prohibit all the Anunnaki to tell the humans that this is coming. It's the opportunity to kill them all. But Enki wasn't feeling so good with that, because he worked a lot in his creation, and he also was teaching them things. As I'm telling you, he was teaching things to the woman and teaching. So he said, no, I am going to secretly tell this guy that later in the Bible is going to be mentioned like Noah, but for the Sumerians, in the Sumerian tablets, is mentioned as Jenganesh, who was a guy that was a son of an Anunnaki and a human. And he was called like a semi-god, and he was going to be also founder of Babylon. He was one of the favorite sons of Enki. And he's going to tell him, it is going to rain terrible, there is going to be a great flood, you have to survive, grab the animals and all my experiments, grab what I have done, protect the DNA of the laboratory, and take it with you, build an ark, and survive during this period. We Anunnaki are going to be in the spaceship in heaven, and we will come back. We will come back later after this. So this is what he's going to do. He's going to appear. He's going to grab his family and the creatures created by Enki, put it in the ark, and he survived the great flood. And this is the city of Babylon that he is going to found after the great flood. He was going to suffer for two things. This guy called Jenganesh. He wasn't a human and he wasn't an Anunnaki. So he was not immortal, or he didn't have a long life like the Anunnakis. And he saw that the other humans died, not only because of the flood, but because of their age. They were dying, and that he was getting older. And he was complaining to the gods about this. So he wanted to try of this fruit that in a way was forgotten. This is the tree of life. Some scholars are going to say that this is more like the DNA, representative of the DNA. This is again the tree of life with the symbol that I mentioned to you, that it is the portal of how they connect with the stars, with their own planet. Here we have the Pleiades, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because apparently Ibiru comes from also the Orion's constellation. And here you see the animals, and all the animals that Enki created. So like, he was a person that allowed the creation to work for him. So he loved his creation. For them, the tree of life was very important because it was the connection between the cosmic spheres. It was the possibility for them to continue dealing with their planet, to continue knowing where were they coming from. It was the portal. And the upper part went to the sky, represents where do they come from. The earth level represents where they are now, and the underground or the roots represent also the infraworld, the subconscious states, or also the minings, because remember that they mined. Their resources, their source of life was coming from beneath the earth. So the tree of life, more than being just a tree, it had a very big value because it represented that connection, that cosmic connection of these beings that they didn't want to lose, knowing that perhaps their planet was not going to survive, not wanting to be people from Earth, because it's not that the whole civilization of them moved up to here. No, a group of people to abstract gold came, and those are the ones that mixed with the creatures here. But the tree of life had a great meaning of this, about how they conceived the creation, how they conceive the world and the understanding. And this guy, Genganesh, he was very curious, and even though the mounts, as I'm telling you, were prohibited for men or for semi-gods like him, from half Anunnaki and half human, he's going to go and explore, and he's going to find out all the places where the ship were, or the places where these spacecrafts were, and the portals where they go up and take the gold. And if you see, there is also there is another coincidence or another connection, and it is that many cultures around Earth are going to give gold or venerate or worship their gods with gold, because they knew that the gods were happy when they give them gold. And in exchange, they were going to receive the food and the shelter and the protection of the natural disasters. That's how the first creatures of the humans were deceived, according to the Sumerian tablets. They were basically living a story that wasn't what was really happening around them. So, the Anunnaki Legacy. This is like the final part that I would like to explain here. In the last book of Zachariah Sitchin, he's going to say that the Anunnaki promised to come back. But don't worry, they say that even though their planet goes around 3,600, there are, according to the measures that they have just done, this is still far. Like a couple of hundreds of times of years still need to pass in order for us to get close to that planet again. The second thing is that perhaps with the polar shift and with things that had happened in space, the time has also altered, being different. The Anunnaki after the Great Flood didn't come back. Some theories are going to say that they hide. Some theories, and that they are among us still. Or some theories will say that we only carry them in our blood. If story is able to prove that this prehistory, or that this is prehistory because it are facts that were supposed to happen before history, before these Sumerian tablets were written, are proved to be true, this is going to completely change and collapse the way that we see our world. And why? First, the monotheistic religions in the Western world had fake gods. Because remember that the biblical tales, the Egyptian tales, the Greek tales, all of these come from this first tale. We also don't know if it's the first one, but it is the most ancient one that we have discovered. And that these gods were not gods of peace and love, and no. They had human emotions, they were fighting with each other, they created wars, they destroyed a planet, they were dominant, they treated us very bad, and they wanted to punish us, basically. So there is something with these gods that they were driven by ego, not by peace and love. Other thing, we are not the special creatures, the special children of God that we thought we were, according to the Western civilizations. We're going to see that this control of the society has expanded through all the civilizations, from this very beginning, from the creation of the humans themselves. I am talking like if this is a fact, but this is like my conclusion about what I see here. Why we cannot know that we have our own power, that we have that serious light inside. Because Enki also is going to say in the Sumerian tablets that he knew that his creation was weak, because we were easy to control through thoughts and through emotions. And all the leaders of the civilizations, from the day one up to now, knew this. We are controlled by the media, we are controlled by this matrix. We are all the time caught in our own dramas. And that's why we are prisoners here. We don't see beyond what we are really capable of doing. That's why we cannot release our soul, release our spirit. But if everybody understands that the religion, the governments, the economy are fake gods, are only trying to control us instead of serving us, and that we have an inner power, that it is that soul that comes from the stars, that have the opportunity to incarnate in this body, to basically have a plan here, which is evolution, which is to discover their own power. That the female power also, that has been all these things, when the Anunnaki started liking women, and because it wasn't a nice story of love, but as I'm telling you, a very cruel story of rape and everything, as Drunvalo Melchizedek is going to say, left a very big wound in the energetic field of humanity. Women basically lost their value. We were treated like animals, like things, but additionally, men, which is our completion, our other part, allied with the gods to receive their favors, and also treated us in the same way, or treated women in the same way. So that is a big wound, without understanding that that imbalance between female and male was causing it also to himself. Because remember, we were one, and in order for us to be ready to evolve, we need two. We need the male and the female principle. That's the way that we maintain balance. Condemning women, treating them bad and everything, also affect their own evolution. So it is, if we understand this, and women understand their own power, the power that doesn't lie on being on top of men, or like dominating men, no, the power lies in knowing that we have the source of creation, and that through our legacy, through our thoughts, through our way of teaching, we maintain all this knowledge and all these things, all what we are, all our energy, to our future generations. That is the big legacy, and that also we are beings of love. That we balance all that young energy of men, that we can do it through love. If we recuperate our power and are able to awake a balanced male into our partner, into our couple, we are going to really use the power that we have. And additionally, if this tale is proved to be true, we're going to understand that all what we have learned are fake scientific theories. This is going to create a crisis of identity for humanity, because not everybody is open-minded to understand that many of the things that we see around is just a creation, that somebody wanted us to believe, to create this world, these things with needs that you don't need, with things that happen that are really not happening, like the atmospheric problems. But in order for you to understand what really caused them, has like a logic, has like a lot of things behind. This can really affect the whole society. So that's why I write here, religion, government, economy, and science will be threatened. And those are the big paradigms in our modern Western society. So even if there are many common things and we corroborate this tale by many things, it's very difficult to be accepted, because it will really collapse what we have created in our world now. The Anunnakis are not bad by themselves. If you see, we carry their blood. We carry that way of thinking. Humanity have killed any other civilization that has opposed or encountered in history, like the Spanish with the Americans when they just found each other. Both of them were trying to defend, because remember, we are territorial. But who won? The one that is stronger. In the same in the Anunnaki. So we cannot judge them, because we have done the same, or maybe that's what we learned. According to the Dalai Lama, if we treat our children with compassion, with love, they are going to be creatures of love. But if we treat our children in different ways, that's what they are going to become. And perhaps that's why we became. But the point here is to recognize that we can take a decision, that we don't have to be that we are different. Recognize that it is we have the possibility to choose. to be different, to cooperate instead of compete, to try to save the life instead of killing it. And also with animals, we do the same with animals. Look how we have our world. We cannot live in the same place where the animals live. We kill the ants, we kill everything that bothers us, we just kill them, the mosquitoes, whatever. Because before other things were bothering, but they already disappeared. But we have the opportunity to choose different, to behave in a different way, to transform, and basically to recuperate our inner power. If we understand this, it doesn't matter if this was true or not, and if it was true, they were only good for us. If we understand that we can choose to be different.